And that brings us to point number 5, which I think is one of your best pieces of IP, which is looking at the entire market capitalization of all of crypto and Web3. And this is really, really important because it's an amazing metric. And if you look at the cycles on this graph, you go back to 2014, where it peaked at 15 billion. You look at 18, where it peaked at 775 billion. You looked at the last cycle, around 2022, it peaked at 3 trillion. And now you're forecasting what's coming up next. Tell us some more about this metric.
Yeah, this is, I think, even more relevant than the duration because, there's a very popular saying, like Brian, which says your time in the market beats timing the market, because it's impossible to fully time the market. And that's why I see signals, if we have these 3 to 5 signals, you have to use them in tandem, so not separately. So this plus this plus this plus this, if all these tend to tell me something, reflect some sort of message to me, then that's when I need to start taking profits. But as you said, I think, we, in terms of the crypto assets total market capitalization, we're aiming between $6 to $9 trillion. Once again, if you know yourself as a more conservative person, then maybe even at the total market capitalization of 5 trillion, you start DCing out to 6 trillion. If you have a little more guts and you're a little more aggressive, then maybe you start DCing out from 6 trillion to 7. If you're straight up degen and you really think that this is the super duper 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 cycle, as you're saying, maybe start DCing out from 7 trillion to 9 trillion. It's up to you, right? But I think this is much more relevant than the average durations.
It's a great metric, and it's right on there on CoinMarketCap if you follow them for prices. And right now we're around 3.5 right now. Interestingly enough, one of Dan Papiero's first fund is called 10T Holdings, which is 10 trillion market cap, which is where he saw it going, I think, in about 10 years time from when he started that back in probably 20 or 19. So it's interesting to see that other players like him are thinking about that as a metric. So that's another one to really, really look at and think about. Next slide, you talk about risk return assets. And I think this is really interesting because you talk about the size of the protocols that we're investing in, with Bitcoin pretty much being the big daddy. It's the biggest one out there. And then going all the way down to these, tiny companies that maybe just launched for their, very first token generation event. What can we get from this graph? What are you trying to tell people?
So I'm trying to tell people that, when you have these categories from a mega cap all the way to a micro cap, the lower you go in terms of market capitalization, the higher the risk you're taking. So what tends to happen is, when you go into full-fledged euphoria, and people, their risk appetite and sentiment goes up. They're like, there's lots of liquidity, even on some of these small or even micro caps, then they go much deeper into their risk tolerance. And they make much bigger gains as well by investing in some of these projects. Obviously, as you said, I think, Brian, if you're spraying and praying, across, let's say 20 micro caps, at least 10 or 15 will be useless. But those few that actually do succeed, they could generate, like, we're talking about life-changing wealth, like 100x's, 200x's.
Yeah.
So if you time that well, what's really important is if you go from that mega cap and you take that risk with the market when the risk on appetite and everything is ready. Once you go down to micro cap, don't forget to go back up to the mega caps, or even buy real estate or buy something maybe that's even negatively correlated to crypto, maybe a car, maybe a painting, sculpture, whatever you really, really like. But it's really important that if you go down from mega cap to small or a micro cap, that you go back up and don't stay drowned down there.
Investment Club. Today, I consider it the best investment that I've ever made. We get 4 projects presented a week by their associated CEOs. Personally, I'm completely blown away by the quality of these projects, and I know of nowhere else where I would be given this same opportunity. Each week that passes, I feel more appreciative of the fact that I'm a member of this group. The vibe was just tremendous. Everybody's on the same wavelength. We just clicked. Everybody listened to each other, enjoyed their company. It was just magical, magical. Take action. Don't take my word for it. Due diligence you need to do. And I really hope that someday down the road I see you in the club. It far exceeded expectations, without question.
Yeah, it's a great concept. And let me throw like something super practical. And so I always tell my students and on my live broadcasts, I always look people dead in the eye and say, right now, owning Bitcoin is the stupidest thing you can do. And people get shocked when I say that because I'm a huge fan of Michael Saylor. I'm a huge fan of what he's doing with MicroStrategy. I'm so happy that Trump wants to make Bitcoin a national reserve and hold 1 million of those. I'm so happy BlackRock is pushing the ETFs. But at the same time, I realize in this cycle, where's Bitcoin realistically going to get to? Is it 200,000? Some people say that's a little toppy. Is it 250? I don't know. There's some people that say it's 800,000, but I don't know. The point is, what are you going to double or triple your money in Bitcoin? But the fact is that if you invest in some of these smaller caps, there are much bigger returns out there. There are 5x and 10x and 20x returns. Now, there will be more risk, but in the beginning of what you think is a bull market, it's probably when you want to make hay when that sun's shining. Now, that being said, you got to get out of those things and put it back into safer assets as the market starts to turn.
Exactly.
So let's say, for example, you know in your crystal ball, this market's going to last 1 year. And that come December, that's going to be our all-time high in Bitcoin, and it's going to start coming off the next year. Well, guess what? That means that you're going to have to start moving from those super micro caps, those meme coins that are based on nothing, with really low market caps. You're going to have to start moving that back into the ETHs and the Bitcoins, and maybe even out of digital assets entirely. Maybe you move it into an S&P 500. Maybe you move it into a piece of real estate. Maybe you move it all the way to cash. And you might say, Brian, why do I want my money in $1? It's got inflation and blah, blah, blah. Okay, yeah. But guess what? $1's worth $1's worth $1. And maybe you want to even put that into $1 in a bank account because you think maybe even the stable coin might have some risk. The point is I totally agree with you. If you go down that ladder, be ready to climb back up that ladder.
Just like a diver, right? If you go deep in the sea, don't forget to come back to the surface.
Yeah.
And as you said, I think one thing that's really, really important is if you go back to the dollar, on the Bitcoin component, right? So I'm 100% with you. I'm not interested in Bitcoin, even if it's 200K, that's a 2x from now. I think there's so many 5 to 10x's out there that it's not worth my time personally. And I think you said something really important. And even when we go back into winter, right? We've harvested our crops. We're having a great potage stoop together. I want to be able to buy back other coins that are not Bitcoin. I want to buy, let's say, for example, some Hyperloop, from the DEXs. I want to maybe buy some Monad. I maybe want to buy some Zero Gravity. And I want to buy some of the projects which I think, have come into this cycle that have enough treasury to survive across the bear cycle. We'll be building incredible tech and we'll come back with even higher highs in the next bull cycle. So as you said, going to the US dollar and waiting until, the knife is dropped, never catch a falling knife, and being able to buy assets, I will very unlikely buy Bitcoin again. So.
Yeah, you want to have dry powder in those bear markets to pick up assets for pennies on the dollar. Back to your new bubble issue versus old bubble, some of these protocols you just mentioned, you believe have real decent longevity. So why not use those times to pick it up on the cheap? And I'll do one more reference back to Dan Tapiero, who I think is probably one of the best traders I've ever met. And I've met them all. I worked in New York, I worked in Chicago, I worked in London, I worked in Tokyo, and he's one of the OG traders. In October of 22, right when FTX announced their bankruptcy, it was probably the lowest point in the bear market for emotions and sentiment. Dan was buying assets through his fund for pennies on the dollar. He was going back and basically re-upping his allocations in equity of his entire digital asset ecosystem. I think he deployed like tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in that quarter, okay? Very few people have the balls to buy when it looks like a falling knife. But Dan is a great macro trader. And for him, he said, look, this is inevitable. The digital asset ecosystem is coming and I'm going to use this as a time to buy. So there are some rare people out there that do exactly what you're saying. For us normal mortals, it's harder to do, but to know that people are doing out there and to be able to get out, I think that's really correct. And that's the best thing. Hey, I know investing in crypto is scary. It takes a real leap of faith because there are so many scams, rug pulls, and bad actors out there. It's a dangerous business, which is why 95% of people lose all their money. Well, that's why I created the London Real Investment Club, so you can access the hottest deals on the planet and use the crypto bull market to create the generational wealth that you deserve. Join my team of over 100 people from around the world that are making millions of dollars behind the scenes investing in blockchain, AI, Web3 games, DeFi, Bitcoin, and more. Don't miss out. Click the link below to book a call with one of my team now. But hurry, this bull market will end soon.
I know investing crypto can be scary. That's why you gotta join the investment club. Pull the trigger. Let's do this.